passive, submissive, and socially muted. The idea of women performing on traditionally male instruments, like the cello or double bass, was a deep source of controversy. Given North America's prudish conventions at the time, it is not surprising that a player's choice or rejection of an instrument often depended on the sexual metaphors evoked by the instrument itself. The curves of the violin, for example, alluded to the female hourglass figure, and when played by a man, emphasized the male superiority over the female and woman as the object of man's desire, herself an instrument of pleasure. Footnote 1. On the other hand, the violin was a soprano instrument, small in dimensions, and did not involve any facial contortions in its playing. This is why the violin was also considered more suitable for women than other string instruments, and partly why the violin was one of the first instruments, besides the piano, to be played publicly by pioneering female musicians, such as Urso, Powell, and Ethel Stark. The cello, however, was another matter. The possible immodest images suggested by the manner of holding the instrument between the legs were enough to dissuade any respectable woman from going near it. Footnote 2. By far the most challenging instruments for women to justify playing were the woodwinds, brass, and percussion. These instruments not only had strong military connotations, thus making them indecent and unbecoming for women, but they also required the distortion of facial features, puffing on a tuba, forcing air through a bassoon, pressing the lips to play a clarinet, or flushing the face in trying to get enough air into a French horn was expected of men, but thought highly unflattering to women. In his 1904 article, Opinions of Some New York Leaders on Women as Orchestral Players, Gustav Köker, a prominent musical director on Broadway, wrote, "Nature never intended the fair sex to become cornetists, trombonists, and players of wind instruments. In the first place, they are not strong enough to play them as well as men. They lack the lip and lung power to hold notes, which deficiency makes them always play out of tune. Another point against them is that women cannot possibly play brass instruments and look pretty, and why should they spoil their good looks?" Footnote 3. Magazines of the early 20th century suggested how women could look their best while playing musical instruments, while others encouraged them to keep to traditional instruments for the sake of their good looks. Because the image of proper, graceful femininity declined in direct proportion to the size, harshness, and volume of sound produced by an instrument. Footnote 4. A woman playing a violin was more tolerated than a woman playing a double bass, and a female flautist was preferred to a female tuba player. Though in reality, none of them were really accepted, simply tolerated for the temporary novelty they created. The idea that women could play the orchestral music of the great masters as well as men would have been received with contempt or disbelief. Likewise, black musicians, male or female, were also excluded from the roster of the symphony orchestras because blacks, like women, were considered too irrational or feminine to play this exclusive collection of concert music. The idea of a female conductor was even more ludicrous. Indeed, it seemed almost impossible. Commentators who even entertained the idea considered conducting to be too physically and mentally demanding for most women. There was also the lingering prejudice against women's leadership. In the 1940s, a 14-year-old girl asked the editor of a music magazine, a former professor of the renowned Oberlin Conservatory in Ohio, "Why is it that no..."